It is Monday, September 9th, and if you will join me with beginning with the Pledge of Allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Ann, would you do a roll call?
Sure. Lyle.
Here.
Bartlett.
Yes.
S. Cortade.
Here.
M. Cortade.
Here.
Cook.
Here.
And Walters.
Present.
And Friend.
Here. Okay, with that, we will take a look at the agenda for review for conflict of interest. You will see the agenda that was sent to you on 8/29, but also two updates, one on 9/6, which added the surplus equipment, and one earlier today that added the election grant agreement. Both of those have been added under the consent agenda. Along with those, you'll see a Northern Michigan EMS Memorandum of Understanding, Station 9 change order, which is actually a reduction, and meeting room and public property safety resolutions and policies. We have the Elmbrook conditional rezoning extension, as well as the Live AE East Bay application, brownfield plan and resolution, the public hearings for the emergency services budget, and the Department of Treasury L4029 for approval, and wanted to bring to you also some discussion on 4 Mile Roundabout. So with that, does anybody have a conflict of interest with anything on the agenda, the proposed agenda? Okay, and is there a motion to approve the agenda? Okay.
Support.
Okay, a motion is made by Lyle and supported by Cook. Any further discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed by no? Okay, we have an agenda, and I will let you know, resolutions begin with number 18. Okay, so with that, we will move on to public comment. I will note that we will have public comment during the public hearing for the emergency services budget. All the other agenda items, the public comment, this would be the appropriate time or at the end of the meeting. So with that, we'll see, is there anybody who would like to deliver public comment? Okay, seeing none this evening, we'll forego reading the rules and we'll just move forward into the correspondence and reports. You have that in your packet. You've got the road commission reports, the 2025 assessor certification level required. They do that every year through the state. Treasurer's report, supervisor's meeting log. And if you have any comments or questions, you can follow up with the appropriate party on those. We'll move into the consent agenda. And with the consent agenda, we have the August 12th board minutes. And as I mentioned, the memorandum of understanding for the Northern Michigan Rural EMS, Station 9 change order, the meeting room and public property safety resolutions and policies, those are two policies, surplus equipment of the wood chipper, and the election grant agreement. Would anybody like any of those removed from the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none, would any member of the public like anything removed from the consent agenda? Okay, Ann, we'll go ahead and have you go through the consent agenda, and then we'll look for a motion.
Sure. The purpose of the consent agenda is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one board motion without discussion.
Oh, sorry, I jumped the gun on you a little bit this month, but that's okay.
Any member of the board, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent agenda be removed and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent agenda, the action noted in parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single board action adopting the consent calendar. As Beth said, we have the minutes from August 12th, 2024, regular meeting. Recommend approval. From the general fund, check numbers 18895 through 18978, paid in the amount of $178,451.63, and check number 18921 was voided. In the emergency fund, check numbers 5701 through 5720 were paid in the amount of $96,016.19. Receiving fund, check numbers 2948 through 2951, paid in the amount of $96,499.83. The escrow fund, check numbers 2027 through 2032, paid in the amount of $20,717.80, with check number 2030 voided. No checks were issued from the SAD fund, and there were 2 payrolls. The payroll dated July 28th through August 10th, check number 7728 through 7797. Yeah. Totaled $104,945.51. And the payroll dated August 11th through August 24th, check number 7801 through 7803, totaled $77,352.20. And total payroll was $182,297.71. Total amount paid, $573,983.16. And our other items are the Northern Michigan Rural EMS Memorandum of Understanding, Station 9 change order, meeting room and public property safety resolutions and policies, surplus equipment, wood chipper, and an election grant agreement.
Okay, and those 2 resolutions under number 3, meeting room and public property safety resolutions will be numbers 18 and 19 respectively. So the meeting room will be 18 and the public property number 19. With that, is there a motion for the consent agenda?
I have just a question. In the second payroll, are the numbers you read were 7801? And on my consent.
Oh, 7798. You
Thank
are
you.
correct.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there support?
Support.
Okay, there's a, Bartlett has moved and M. Cortate has supported the consent agenda as presented. We'll do a roll call vote, Ann?
Bartlett,
Yes.
M. Cortade,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
S. Cortade,
Yes.
Lyle,
No.
Walters,
Yes.
and Friend.
Yes. Okay, with that, we'll move before the business before the Township Board. First on our agenda is the Elmbrook Conditional Rezoning Extension. We do have Joe Lucrecio here, and we also have Claire Carner here. Claire, if I could have you maybe just come up and provide a little bit of an overview. This has been before the Planning Commission, and as well, we have Mindy Walters here, who is our appointee on the Planning Commission.
Good evening, everyone. So this zoning amendment, it was 2-21. It was, if you'll recall, it was a conditional rezoning of 3 parcels of land that make up generally Elmbrook Golf Course. It was approved back in 2021. It comprised 228 acres of land. It went into effect in November of 2022. So as you'll recall, there's about 30 acres up front right along Hammond that was rezoned to high-density residential, and the remaining parcels further back from Hammond were rezoned to moderate-density residential. So at that time, it went into effect in 2022. There were a number of conditions that were offered by the applicant and accepted by the township at the time. One in particular was a limit on the maximum total number of units. It was 912, which is equivalent to an average of 4 units per acre. So quite a bit lower density than what's currently permitted in those zoning districts. There's also another offer that was another item that was offered by the applicant was some significant buffering along kind of the perimeter of the parcel to help buffer from the single-family residential uses surrounding that parcel, as well as others types of uses, limiting it to only residential uses, as well as golf. So the conditional rezoning is set to expire in November of 2025, so the Township Board approved it for 3 years, and it would be that November 2025 date of expiration, as stated in the approval documents, is that substantial construction of Phase 1 would need to have began. So the applicant would have needed to begin the substantial construction. So Elmbrook was approved for Phase 1 of this development last month, August 20th. And so as approved by the Planning Commission on August 20th, Phase 1 consists of 201 rental units. It's a mix of triplexes and quadplexes for rent. And as you'll see, I included an email from the applicant just to the need for that extension based on high interest rates, high cost of construction materials, and just the fact that getting from the approval period, the approval to getting the commencement of substantial construction into the ground takes time, just with water and sewer permitting. So before you tonight is a request for an extension of that. Last month, the Planning Commission did recommend an extension. It was a vote of 5-1 for the extension, I believe, so. So
Okay.
happy to answer any questions, and Joe is here as well.
Very good. Also on your desk, you do have one exhibit here, Elmbrook Golf Course, that just didn't print very well in your packet, so you do have that for your reference if you'd like it. Mindy, did you have anything to add as also a planning commissioner and board member?
I will say that on the packet for the planning commission, there was an error on this figure that you have in front of you that has been corrected. One of the parcel IDs was not included. So I just want to make sure that if you happen to see that meeting and see that that was being questioned, that has been corrected. I also will say that the Phase 1 development is going to be in phases itself. And the first phase is approximately 100 units, is that?
Right.
And that will stay under the threshold needed for the traffic light at Town Line in Hammond. Above 150 units, they need a traffic light at Town Line in Hammond. As you might recall, when Costco went in, that traffic study had a light going in at Town Line in Hammond, but that's a jurisdictional issue because like the city required it, but the road commission said that they can't do that. So who actually pays for that light might still be up in the air a little bit. But there's lots of discussion too with the new development, and this doesn't have anything to do with this rezoning extension, but lots of neighbors came out and were concerned about the school bus stop and things like that. And since then, Claire has talked to TCAPS, and they've figured out what they think is going to be a better solution to the bus stop. So concerns of those kind of things have been working out as we come up to them, so.
And Mindy, I will also mention, thanks for bringing that up at the last meeting with the Costco. The Traverse City Legal Counsel is looking into that approval and
Okay.
is going to follow up with us.
Okay, very good, thank you. Joe, did you want to add anything, or
No, just.
if you would come up to the...
Other than, we appreciate the planning commission, approving the project. And, we've had a great experience developing Bayview, and we look forward to same kind of thing with Elmbrook. And we would appreciate your consideration on this, just because, when conditions are right for development, interest rates and everything else, whether it's construction or permanent financing, even when things are right, it's very challenging. And so, conditions are very tough right now, and there's uncertainty in the market. And so we're just, we're prepared to go. We just, having that substantial construction start by November of 2025 is just over a year from now, and whether or not we will be ready, we're not sure. And we do have some things to work out. The stoplight is not necessarily one of them, but when we get beyond 100 units, as Ms. Walters mentioned, we also have some issues with sanitary infrastructure that we need to upgrade to take on additional units beyond 100. So there's going to be a lot to do yet from an engineering standpoint. So we ask that you grant this extension for us in the event we need the extra time. So.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, do any board members have any questions for Claire or Joe or Mindy?
Just to be clear, is
Sure,
it
go
a
ahead.
one-year extension?
This is a 2-year
2 year?
extension.
Okay, okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Yep. Glenn, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm way ahead of the game here, but water and sewer map, it doesn't show the water or the sewer going to Town Line Road.
It does, though. It,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay. That's all, the only question I have.
Okay, very good. Any other questions?
Just on the extension itself, do we have, is there any, probably not a policy in place for this, but do we have a precedent here at the township on extensions and when they're granted? I mean, just considering that it's 14 months in advance of the expiration, is there a reason why we would grant the extension now and not wait till a later date?
Versus later. I'll defer to Claire on what they've seen come previously, but from Township's perspective, we really take that recommendation from the Planning Commission when they choose to do that. And I would imagine that it is the developer's preference to do so, to have some reliability in the timing and know what they're able to schedule. But I'll let Claire and perhaps Joe comment on that.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. If we, like with the site plan approval, PUD approval, those are good for 2 years, and you can extend up to 1 year, and it's like all spelled out in the zoning ordinance. With the conditional rezoning, there's no time stance in place, and so, based on our legal counsel, the township board ended up, putting it in for 3 years, but there is some flexibility based on kind of how long you initially put it in, and then a term of extension. There's nothing kind of spelled out what that term would be. And
Okay, so we're within our ability to do that.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I was just really kind of curious
Yeah.
about the timing of, this went into effect in November of '22. It was a 3-year conditional rezoning to begin with. So we're basically at the halfway point of that, approving the extension. Little more, maybe 60% of the way.
Yeah.
Approving an additional 2 years on it.
Yeah, I think it is a good point, but I also, through what we've done with the township, we know how much effort and resources, financial resources, personnel resources go into the pre-planning of these projects before they even hit a shovel in the ground. So I think it is important, if they are looking for that reliability, that's a reasonable request, in my opinion.
yeah, the other thing I'll just mention about this conditional rezoning, since it was conditionally rezoned, the master plan's been updated, the future land use map has been updated, and so I think one point to make is that likely this would be just, it would likely be a good candidate for just a straight rezoning at this point to the moderate and high density, and so I think this conditional rezoning does put some protections in place for the surrounding residential community, as opposed to if we let that lapse and then we looked at just a rezoning application, then that would likely be a good candidate for just a straight rezoning request.
I think there was, let's see, it looks like on page 56 and 57, it kind of shows the zoning that's around the parcel. So, yeah, Glenn, go
I
ahead.
just wanted, back in, I think it was 2008, 2009, we had given extensions because of the financial thing, so this isn't anything really new.
I was just going to mention that when I was on the planning commission at that time, and we had a large development that was working on their financing, and it was worse conditions at that point, but, yeah, it was 7 years, and so and I think I don't remember.
We extended it twice.
Yeah, we extended it several times, so I understand the need I know that the infrastructure and the planning going into this is huge, and some comfort to know that you can do it would probably be good.
Yeah. And that map actually that I was trying to reach for was actually page 50, that shows the future land use map plus the requested rezoning when they looked at the
Yeah, and
conditional.
that is from their original application that they resubmitted, so that's the 2015 future land use map.
Okay, any further questions?
I'll make a motion to approve an extension to the zoning amendment 2-21 Elmbrook conditional rezoning to expire November 1st, 2027, if substantial construction of Phase 1 has not commenced.
Okay, and you sounded a little bit, that's because if they do have substantial, yeah, okay,
Think it through.
yeah. Okay, that is moved by Walters and supported by Lyle. We'll do a roll call, Ann?
We had Cook down. Walters?
Yes.
Lyle?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Bartlett?
Yes.
M. Cortade?
Yes.
S. Cortade?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. All right, next on our agenda is Alan Edwin Holmes with a brownfield plan and resolution Live AE East Bay application. So with this, you do have as well some printouts here that are paper clipped that are just better printouts than if you would have printed this out on your home copier, and also the financials as well behind it that had the tax capture and so forth. So for this, we have Brian Farkas, who is the Director of Workforce Housing for Allen Edwin Homes. We have Joe Agostinelli, who is a consultant, financial consultant working with them. And we also have Roger Mobby of Mobby Otwell Associates presenting. So, and then of course Claire is here as a resource as well. How are you this evening?
Good, how are you?
Good. And you have a presentation.
Yes.
And if you'd like the copies, you could hand to Ann and she can, what's that?
Did you give the copies?
Oh, I thought you did the copies.
No, I thought-
I did the
I'm
copies.
sorry, yes.
That's perfect. That's perfect. I apologize.
No, I'm sorry.
Completely, I apologize. We should have checked on that earlier today.
Can we just get them at the end?
The file, he sent the file and it was copied to Ann. So you should have that. But he has the copy, he'll be going through this here on the screen. It'll just make it a little bit easier to see for you.
Apologies.
So my apologies. I apologize. I probably said, well, I would make the copies and have them here at the meeting and so, okay.
So thank you for having me.
Of
Brian
course.
Farkas with Allen Edwin Homes. We'll go through a quick presentation and then any questions. So what we're looking to do with the Bridgentine site is put in 170 single-family homes. This is an effort between Allen Edwin Homes and Live Communities. We're one of the top 100 builders in the country and the largest home builder in Michigan. And Live develops premium communities in Arizona and across Michigan as well. We're looking to develop the site, again, with 170 single-family homes. 20% of the homes we put in will be reserved for families making under 100% of the area median income. And our local partners are Otwell Mobby, Mansfield, and Soils and Structures. And we're actually really thrilled about this project and its proximity to Traverse City, this whole region. From our metrics and from any study you want to put together, is extremely constrained with housing. I don't need to spend too much time on that today. I think we all know what we're dealing with here. We've already conducted due diligence on the site, and we have a clear pathway towards groundbreaking if the TIF is approved. And this development would not be possible if it wasn't for the local cooperation we have, and we're very grateful to that, and for the new TIF legislation that I'll get into shortly that we're using. But right now, our groundbreaking is scheduled for this fall. The current conditions on the site, there's foundations in place right now from two previous failed developments on the site. This is a tough property to develop. And again, as evidenced by the fact that you've got foundations in the ground right now from a previous development. We're going to put in 170 single-family homes. They're going to have amenities, 2 dog parks, pickleball, things like that in the area, playground area, and then parking for RVs and campers and things like that on the site. Here's what the project's going to look like. I think someone else from my office came through when they did the site plan, but it's worth revisiting. These will be detached single-family homes. This is a sample of a street view. And then each product close up. This is our Integrity 1800, bi-level, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bath, attached 2-stall garage. the integrity 1910, integrity 2085, and the project amenities. One of the things we added to this plan, working with the township and towards the end, was expanding. So in addition to the on-site amenities, we're going to be helping expand the trail system around the site. So in the TIF, the portion of our land that abuts the street on 4 Mile and Hammond, we're going to install a 10-foot wide paved path. And then the TIF will also include funding for the township to have a 10-foot wide path along the same thing to connect the trail system around there. The rents and financials will come in. So we've got a 3-bedroom, a 4-bedroom, and a 5-bedroom. Now, the rents for the 3-bedroom that are not workforce housing will come in at about $3,000 a month. The TIF will allow us to provide the same 3-bedroom home for about $2,300 a month. I can
They
hardly
do
see it
have
on
that
my
in
screen.
front, they do have that in front of them.
Okay.
That's in the.
Excellent.
Love it.
If I'm having trouble seeing it on my monitor, I can't imagine trying to read it off the big screen. And so that'll be a savings of about $800 a month for the workforce housing families. On the 4-bedroom, you're looking at a non-subsidized rate of about $3,250. And for the 4-bedroom workforce housing, you're going to see about $2,500. And for the 5-bedroom, the non-workforce housing will be $3,500, and the workforce housing will be about $2,800. Now, it's important to note that the earlier renderings that I showed you, the workforce housing and the non-workforce housing homes, they'll be indistinguishable from the street. There's not going to be a section of the development that is workforce housing, and this is where those people live, and here's where other people live. It's going to be interspersed, and you will not be able to tell a difference from the street view on it. And we thought that was very important. Just for comparables, you've got the Bayview project just to our west. They've got an attached 3-bedroom for just under $3,000. The new phase going in is 3-bed, 3.5, 1-car garage, starting at $3,100. Our product is detached. And you're going to have a 2-car garage, 4 and 5 bedrooms, full basement with about 800 square feet of storage space included. Again, comparable rents in the area. And then with that, I'll turn it over to Joe to dive into the spreadsheets.
I'm breaking my own rule as a consultant, is you're never doing well when you're talking about a spreadsheet in a public meeting, so my apologies. But I think it's important to identify sort of the challenges that the development community, I think the same thing the previous project was talking about. It's really, really hard to get deals done right now. And this new TIF legislation really is unlocking a lot of opportunity for moving new housing projects forward around the state, and especially up here. So what we're showing here is the 20-year income stream forecast, and draw your attention to the red box. That's the debt service coverage ratio. So when you're borrowing from a bank, they're going to say you need $1.2 for every dollar of revenue to cover the amount of debt that's anticipated on the project. That's the bank's buffer, right? So you're showing here we're underwater throughout the entire term of the first 10 years of the project if there's no TIF flowing into the project. So that's the problem we're trying to solve for here. And as you can see here, this is, years 11 through 20 of the same cash flow. We finally poke our head above water after 12 years, it looks like, without the TIF. So a bank's not going to make a loan on that deal, is the underlying issue. So this is the same forecast with the TIF layered back in. I skipped on accident, my apologies. As you can see, we're underwater during the lease-up period, essentially. So the developer is going to have to cover some shortfalls in those first couple of years as the development comes online. But then the deal actually cash flows, and the bank will lend money against it. This is, sorry, I didn't skip. This is, as you can see, then the deal becomes healthy and above water. Same projection. Important to note here, the developer return on investment, right? As anybody making an investment right now in today's interest rate environment, you can deposit money in a high yield savings account and make 3.5% on your money and take zero risk. That's basically what this deal generates without the TIF in the project. And it doesn't cash flow with the bank. So with the TIF, we're generating a return that's closer to about 6%. That gets you into a point where it makes sense to take some risk in this investment versus, less risky options. And that's the purpose of these incentive tools, is to allow the project to move forward. So this slide's showing the ultimate amount of TIF support that would be flowing into the project. As we're showing here, state school tax capture, so we're anticipating approval of what's called an Act 381 work plan that allows you to capture school taxes by the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, and we've had some really good conversations with them over the last several months. And I believe are going to be supportive of that. Ultimately, we're showing about 10 million in school tax capture and about 6 million in local tax increment revenue capture on the project.
Joe, real quick, I did have a question from Trustee Lyle about the Public Act 33, the police, fire, and ambulance, and whether that was captured or not. And I see in here that you have it as not captured, which we know it's not a tax, it's an assessment. So I just wanted to clarify, we did get that answer to him.
Absolutely, yeah. The Brownfield program only allows you to capture ad valorem property taxes. So any special assessment is by statute, you're unable to capture it.
Sure.
On that, when you the recapture, I'm reading your spreadsheet here for emergency services, the non-capturable millage, and I assume that means that Brownfield can't get the money, it comes to the township.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you're seeing two millages there, the school debt millage and.
Right, school debt.
Those are the two that are not captured.
Okay, but what my question is, when I'm looking at these numbers, am I right in assuming that if you take year number 2, 86,490 will come back for emergency services?
Let me look at my version of the spreadsheet. We're looking at the capture table year 2. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, bear with me, almost there. Not quite. There we go. All right, year 2, 86,490 is the captured, correct, yes, in year 2 to the emergencies. So that's not going to be captured, that would flow to your emergency services special assessment district.
Okay, and I guess where I wondered about that is I know when you get a tax exemption, TIF, whatever you want to call it, it locks, it's my understanding now, I could be mistaken, but then it locks the taxable value at what it is when you start the project. No?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think what you're talking about are tax abatements, which are like a Public Act 198 tax abatement
Okay.
you would do with an industrial property. That's, I'm sorry, PA 198 wouldn't freeze either. A pilot perhaps would freeze. In this case, we're not doing anything with the taxable value of the property, and instead we're capturing the growth of revenue that occurs as a result of the project, only within those millages that are capturable.
Okay, you answered my big question.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem.
That's not necessarily true, and you can look at your second line item where it shows the base taxable value goes all the way across, and but you are capturing the increase, so.
Okay.
So you are locking it.
Well, the amount of tax paid by the developer is not frozen. They're paying on the new value,
Well,
and then
absolutely, it's the difference. It's
Correct, yeah,
that for which is the difference, but you are locking that base rate.
correct, yes.
And that's what
For
you
the,
just asked.
for the purpose of showing the difference, but the assessment for the municipal services goes with the value.
Correct,
It
the special
increases every
assessment
year like it
millage.
does now.
Go ahead.
The the special assessment millage is not touched by the brownfield program at all. The financing source for the incentive is the capture of the growth. So yes, all the other taxing jurisdictions, the county, the library, Beta, et cetera, the township, is effectively freezing the amount of tax they're going to receive from the property. Is that yes, correct. So two different things going on with the special assessment and then the everything else, correct.
Are you guys clear on that? Good?
No, I think so.
Okay.
I just, as long as I'm looking at the emergency service special assessment, second line from the bottom there, as long as that's the amount that we got coming back for emergency services, and it increases every year as the value goes up.
Correct.
That's what my concern is. My concern is not putting the financial burden on the taxpayers when you give out. We've talked about pilots here before. This is the first time I've ever seen something like this, so.
Yeah, it's a new program, so there's not been a lot of these deals done in the state. So yeah, it's new for a lot of folks, so we're happy to go through the education process.
Mindy?
So my concern is that we often use our fund balance instead of raising our millages. So that process that we've been doing is not being affected. It is effectively negative, I don't know how to say this, but we are not getting the increases in our millages because we're using fund balance, right, to our taxpayers. But we are effectively missing part of this because of,
You're still assessing the the assessment is still on the taxable value of the overall project.
Yeah, would it be helpful for me to just maybe back up a little bit to more
Yes.
Brownfield 101 and how this all
Yeah.
kind of works?
I tell you what, in fairness, because I didn't have these copies for you, let's just take 5 minutes and let's let the board take a look through this, and then we can go through, then we can address that question, okay?
Yeah, I can see if I have a presentation I could probably pull up if you want, 5 minutes, but
Well, I think we'll
you want
let
another
you,
PowerPoint, but.
let's let the board go through this, and then we can have you finish. And as well, then we have Ann Jamison here too, who can visit with the board as well, so. All right, let's just take about 5 minutes, guys. Okay, are you guys about ready to get going? Okay, so what we'll do, if that's okay, Joe, we will come back to the presentation and we'll start where you took over with this sheet. So if you'll go back a couple slides, it'll be much easier for us because we have that smaller print available. The earlier material, Brian, I think we kind of all get the idea about the development and what you're doing there as far as the housing and the amenities.
We'll dig into the spreadsheet. So happy to answer whatever questions folks have.
So we'll kick off right after Brian went through the houses, and your first slide, I think, was project financials.
That was Brian's slide. but
Oh, it was, okay.
Yeah, because
Yeah, I was
that
going through the
describing
rent
the-
rate.
Comparable, okay?
Yep. Do we want to?
Sure, let's do that, yep.
Yep, all right, I think I can cover this one. Brian will jump in if I get anything wrong here. So there's essentially 6 types of units here. We've got 3-bedroom market rate, 3-bedroom workforce housing, 4-bedroom workforce housing, et cetera. So as you can see on here, the market rate, 3 bedrooms is about $3,000 a month with the TIF subsidy, which we can talk about how the economics of that work. We're able to charge a little, quite a bit less, $2,300 a month for the 3s. For the 4-bedroom units, it's $3,250 for market rate versus $2,567 for the workforce housing units, and $3,500 for the 5-bedroom and $2,856 for the workforce housing units.
Is everybody seeing those different rates on that table with there's 6 there, but 3 of them have workforce housing, WFH at the end of them, showing the rates? Okay, good.
And the reason that works to get into the weeds a little bit further on that is the new brownfield legislation allows you that gap between the market rate and the affordable units becomes an eligible activity that gets reimbursed with the tax increment. So that's how you're able to do that.
I'll go ahead.
Mindy, let's go ahead and wait with the specific questions until we get back around. Let him finish through the presentation and let Ann present as well. Unless you have a clarification, but specific questions and getting into the weeds, we'll hold off till then.
It's a very,
Okay?
it's 95% occupancy assumed here, correct?
Yes, 5% vacancy is the assumption
Thank you.
in the model.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Right. Comparable rents I'm not as familiar with, other than they're roughly the same for more compact apartment-style developments as opposed to what these would be as single-family homes. And yeah, I think that everybody makes sense. So then, what we were getting into previously, this is a spreadsheet showing our projected cash flow in the project, and the red box at the bottom showing our debt service coverage ratio. That's the amount of revenue left over after debt, after payment of debt service. The bank wants to see a ratio at minimum 1.2 is pretty standard in the lending industry. So you can see without the TIF revenue, which would be the second line from the top of the spreadsheet, you're seeing no dollar amounts input there. That's generating effectively below underwater debt service coverage ratio. So a bank would not lend in this deal. The next page is your years 11 through 20, where you're seeing our head come back above water, effectively out at year 12, without the TIF revenue in the project. The next page looks at the same projection with the TIF flowing into the project, which you're seeing across, again, that second line from the top. Still underwater in those early lease-up years as you're incurring a lot of cost and not yet having full revenue realization. And then immediately after you get through the lease-up period, your head's above water with a debt service coverage ratio where a bank will actually loan against the project. So that difference being the TIF revenue flowing in or not flowing in. The next page is just the year 11 through 20 projections as well. And then the next page is projected returns. So this is, I was mentioning before, a zero-risk investment right now is paying about 3.5%. And that's roughly what the project that without TIF is generating. And again, that would be assuming a bank would loan against it, which a bank wouldn't. But that's the return that we'd be seeing. And then on the right side, you're seeing what the project looks like with the TIF flowing into the project, generating above a zero risk return at about 6%, 6.1%. Which shows the need for, the incentive. The math just doesn't work on this project without the incentive. The next page, we're looking at the total amount of state school taxes and local tax capture flowing into the project. Here, about 10 million from the state and about 6 million of local tax increment that's captured over the life of the plan. And that's inclusive of the last 5 years that are being captured by the county brownfield authorities, local brownfield revolving fund, to be used to be invested in future projects.
Yeah, the clarification?
Yes, on the tax, you got millage rate at 13.44441 and total millage 44.5541. Where does local millage is what the township takes in, correct? What they charge on taxes?
What are the millage rates being captured? Is that the question?
Well, it does explain what that 13.4441
yeah.
encompasses.
If you go to this page, which was in your packet and is in the clipped handout, if you go to you had this on your desk and it was in the packet and it says table 2 on it. Go to the second page.
While you're looking for it, I can give you the short answer is the local millage captures everything except school debt and the emergency services special assessment.
So the 13.441 is here. There you go. It's that middle section right there.
This one?
Yes.
Okay, that's all okay. We need bigger sheets here.
So I started, it's never good when we're talking about spreadsheets, but it's important. That's where the incentive's coming from. So you're asking great questions. It's important that you understand what's going on. Are we good to move forward?
Yep, you're good.
All right. That was my last slide. So we just have some bios of the team in your packet from LIV. They've done a lot of great projects. I'm not going to read this. You can look through them as well. But then along with the bios of the team from Allen Edwin. So that, in summary, again, we're 170 single-family homes. Of those, about 35 will be affordable and income restricted. To people making between 80 and 120% AMI and priced below 100% AMI. The projected reimbursement of the TIF back to the developers anticipated to run for about 14 years, then plus 5 years to the county's brownfield revolving fund. And on the right side here, we're listing out the total eligible activities that are being reimbursed with the tax increment revenue generated by the project. A little bit of environmental remediation and or due diligence, I should say, some demolition, site preparation work, a fair amount of infrastructure improvements, and then the affordability subsidy. And then the last thing I would add is we've already, as part of the negotiation with the township and with the county brownfield authority, what we're showing here in terms of site preparation and public infrastructure is about half of what would be eligible. We've agreed that only 50% of those eligible costs will be reimbursed as part of the project. So yeah, in summary, we're taking the foundations in the ground to, brand-new development. So
Okay.
I believe that's the last slide. So we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, and I think before we do that, we'll have plenty of questions, but I want to bring Claire up just to talk about the process you went through with the Planning Commission, and then we'll have Ann Jamison talk about the process this will go from if this is approved through tonight and in the subsequent boards. Thank you. Claire?
Well, I didn't hear the beginning of the presentation, so I'm not sure if there was discussion about just kind
We
of
didn't-
the overview of the community and,
We didn't talk about the site plan when it was approved, or
Okay.
the sketch plan,
Okay.
or anything.
okay. So, so the applicant came in front of the Planning Commission in April of this year for sketch plan review. This process actually started even before, well, as you know, there was a couple of developments that were approved that didn't move forward, but even before the site plan, the applicant came in front of the Planning Commission and Township Board for a zoning text amendment. So if you'll recall, this was the applicant that was kind of the impetus for amending our ordinance for moderate density residential from 5 up to 8. So I think that is something to mention, because this particular parcel, and I think the direction that they were originally going was multifamily development. So this parcel could have been over 300 units of multifamily development. I think through the process, looking at the community, looking at the surrounding land uses, kind of the demand in this region, they settled on 170 single-family detached homes. So I think that is worth noting, just because the infrastructure and costs associated with building those homes that will be for rent is more cost-intensive compared with a multifamily development. So they came in front of after the zoning text amendment, they came in front of the Planning Commission in April for sketch plan review, received feedback. A lot of it was kind of looking at access, connections. Planning Commission was looking for internal circulation, sidewalks, pathways consistent with the township's non-motorized planning effort. We did hear from neighboring communities, or neighboring residents, Crystal Ridge and some of the other residents along Vanderlip. They were responsive to those requests, came back in June for the site plan review, public hearing. Planning Commission approved that in June of this year. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the development, because I assume that Brian went into the detail of the amenities and kind of what's within that, so.
Dog parks, sidewalks.
Yes, exactly. The other thing I did want to touch on tonight, and Beth, I can wait on that, but just the trail components that we were looking
Why
at.
don't you go ahead?
For the brownfield plan. So in talking with the applicants and looking at the brownfield plan, Beth and I found out that there was also an opportunity, and has been done in other communities, for the local unit of government to include in the brownfield plan some public infrastructure amenities that would be paid for by the unit of government if they were not directly on that property or directly adjacent, but would serve this community as well as the community as a whole. So one thing that we are looking at and are proposing in this brownfield plan would be, once the property owner is fully reimbursed through the brownfield plan, the township also would have the opportunity to extend the trail. So right now, we have with our Safe Routes to School, we're going all the way to the edge of the Chartwell development along Hammond. And so we would have the opportunity to extend that basically from that edge of the Chartwell development to this intersection at Hammond and 4 Mile. And that would provide a lot of connectivity for Crystal Ridge, for Waterview Ridge, for Brigantine, for the new Blue Water View that's going to be coming in front of the Planning Commission in a couple of weeks, to get all of those residents, kids safely to the schools. So that would be an option to include in the brownfield plan. The township could ultimately get reimbursed for that infrastructure investment after the developer did. And so that was, the total cost of that was about $400,000. So that's an option for the township to also consider, that could be a benefit and kind of in terms of us looking forward and expanding that trail system.
Okay, very good, thank you. Anne, could we have you come up and visit? As I think it was Joe or Brian mentioned, these are relatively new statute and program that we're dealing with. So I think it was approved in late 22 or early 23? June, okay.
Actually, sorry, July. of
July.
23, yeah.
And-
So just about a year.
Yeah, and I think in the months since then, you'll recall that Anne had presented either to us or to MTA in October and had said, you know, I'll be back again because there's going to be so many changes just beginning to implement this. So what the legislation did was really expand the brownfield opportunities for housing. So with that, I'll let Anne take over and talk about this project.
Okay, great. So nice to see you all again. Beth's exactly right. So the legislation was adopted last year, July of 2023. And since then, there's been various rollouts from MISTA on guidelines assisting brownfield redevelopment authorities on what costs are eligible, what are not eligible, and really the intent of the program is to really increase our workforce housing in Michigan, as well as allow for additional housing to be built outside of workforce housing with the intent and the knowledge that as folks, move into homes they can afford, and then they can move up to another bracket. So the more housing, the better, is sort of the temperament right now in Michigan. As a Brownfield Authority, we've been working closely with a number of our communities. We've had one particular Brownfield plan approved in Garfield Township. That was approved back in May. So that went through the whole process. We went to the Township Board. We did presentations. That was a multifamily development, unlike this one, which was single family. They had a higher number of workforce housing, but it was sort of tempered towards that for that type of multifamily product. That went through the whole process to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority and then to the Board of Commissioners for full support. They are coming back this Thursday to our authority to get approval of their development and reimbursement agreement, which is a legal agreement that basically requires certain things get reported to the authority. So as part of this new housing development program, MISTA and Brownfield authorities are responsible for basically tracking income levels. So in other words, if you are going to rent a home or you're going to rent an apartment, you have to qualify for that certain rental income level, and then the rents have to proportionally meet that. So it's basically a program to allow for, folks like your, folks who work at the gas station, or your teachers, your firemen, normal working folks who are really being pushed out of a housing market because it's been so inflated lately. So the authority will be doing yearly tracking of this. So as they do a lease up on their new tenants in their buildings, they basically have to report to the Brownfield Authority by May 1st of every year, so that the Brownfield Authority can then report back to MISTA and MEDC, because we have reporting requirements we have to do every year to track how much tax revenue we capture per project within all of our communities within the county that have brownfields. I think the biggest challenge, and I'll be frank, the biggest challenge with this brownfield program in particular, it's not black and white. Back in the day, we were looking at it's environmentally contaminated or it's not environmentally contaminated. And the eligible costs were very straightforward. It was, okay, you can pay for your phase 1s, your phase 2s, your BEAs, your cleanup, your remediation, your backfill from the remediation. On the non-environmental, which is only eligible in the city of Traverse City because it was a core community, we could expand to include site preparation and infrastructure, which I really think is a benefit for your community now, that we can do that. We can leverage what only core communities could benefit from for your community. The addition of the trails is a great example. If there was a new main that had to come in off, down the road, and there was no potable water that was coming in to the service this new development. Those are other types of costs that can be leveraged. Crosswalks, sidewalks, trails, streetlights, all those types of things, which again, without development coming in that's going to promote economic increase in property taxes, the communities don't have as many, benefits in order to leverage those dollars. So again, part of the benefit, I think, for your townships is that now we can utilize the tax increment revenue for reimbursement of public-private, type of P3 programs, as we call them, public-private partnerships. Lastly, I think with the biggest analysis we go now is the fiscal analysis. So within the legislation, it's pretty clear that, you have to demonstrate that there's a financial need to the developer in order to support the potential rent loss and all other types of infrastructure and/or site preparation on site. So part of our due diligence, we worked with the development team probably over 2-3 months, going through different scenarios on what is the best balance for their basically bottom line to be able to leverage a loan from a senior lender or a construction loan. And then really what was the balance between making it sort of fair across the lines. Like, we're not over-incenting the program, we're not utilizing the program to over-incent housing rent loss or costs that would normally be part of a development, right? Because that was some of the cost concern we were thinking about. So that's when that proportionality discussion started coming in. We're starting to have these, policies. We have policies in place that there's a proportional amount of the infrastructure eligible activities, site preparation eligible activities that are proportional to the amount of the actual workforce housing component. And so if the developer demonstrates, in this case, it's a single-family home construction, the cost of infrastructure and site prep are going to be much more than, say, a multifamily development, because you have much more infrastructure serving those entire, different single-family homes. So this, in terms of next steps, we went through a full review at the county with our staff and myself, and do feel that this would be very supported at the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority and at the Board of Commissioners. So the next steps are, upon consideration and approval on your part, the next step would be going to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority this Thursday. We have our meeting at 9 a.m. at the county governmental building. You're welcome to come. And so that's at 9 a.m. And then they'll be going through the same, basically, presentation to our board. Upon our board approval, we make recommendations, the Brownfield Authority makes recommendations to the Board of Commissioners, and then the Board of Commissioners has the final vote. At the Board of Commissioners meeting, we have a public hearing, so it also has to go through a public hearing process. We anticipate that public hearing to be held October 16th, as well as the anticipated approval of the project. Following the local government's approval, that approves that Brownfield plan. So the Brownfield plan is approved. We then put together what's called a development and reimbursement agreement that I was talking to you about, that basically binds legally the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority to capture the revenue that's available for tax capture, plus the debt mills and special assessments, and then with the entity that's doing the development, so that they're party to that. There's no assignment of tax revenue to a third party unless it's transparently discussed, and if they want to assign a portion of the tax revenue to their bank as collateral, they can do that, but that also has to be part of that transparent process with that development and reimbursement agreement. Following the approval of that at the Brownfield Authority, comes back to us again, then the Act 381 work plans are submitted to, in this case, MSHDA. So it's the Michigan State Housing Development Authority that now is also reviewing plans. Previously, work plans were reviewed by EGLE, the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy,
or the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, MEDC. So we now have a third agency that's partnering with our local units of government, which is their goal and objectives is to bring in more workforce housing for our communities. So thank you.
Actually, can you talk to us a little bit about the flow or record keeping? First, let's deal with the record keeping, because I inquired about that, and I know Tracy was very happy to hear that that's not something that she has to certify on the rents or anything.
Right?
So could you talk a little bit about how that happens subsequent to this?
Yeah, so essentially, our Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, oh no, sorry, just drop the phone and then turn the light, okay. Our Brownfield Redevelopment Authority treasurer is actually, it's Heidi Shuppy, and she was our county treasurer. She actually now has a job with the city of Traverse City. She's their treasurer, but she is our acting treasurer for the Brownfield Authority. So essentially what she does is she will be working with a new county treasurer, Sarah Gum. Sarah and her will be working with all of our municipalities. So as the taxes are paid to the treasurer then, sends those dollars over to the county reconciles all the monies, and if there's different types of abatements or there's a brownfield, then there's a set aside for the specific project linked to that brownfield plan. So we don't have a big pot of money that goes into a big, it's site-specific, and the taxes are only collected when we see an increase in value. The developer is only reimbursed when we see that the developer has actually completed the project and has submitted what's called a reimbursement request. That reimbursement request comes into the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority staff. We review those invoices, check those boxes, make sure everybody's been paid. We have them sign waivers, we have insurance requirements. It's a whole fun process. Not really. It's probably the worst part of the job. And so once that packet comes in, those are for like the hard cost I'm talking about, right? So we'll review and approve those, and then we'll set aside, say they've finished 6 million they may not incur 10 million. In certain cases, infrastructure, in this case, I think it was 3. So, in certain cases, sometimes it doesn't come in that high, although infrastructure is infrastructure, so it probably will. But typically, we only reimburse for what they incur. We don't just give them a check for what they get approved for. We actually have to see proof in the pudding that they've actually completed what they said they would do, and we review all those invoices. Set that aside, and then for the income and rent verification, that will be done upon lease up for the income yearly on the rent base. So we'll be working with their leasing office and leasing company on that for the yearly reporting requirements. In some cases, we see brownfield plans actually pay the eligible activities down quicker than the 16 years. So it just depends on what the actual incremental increase in the property taxes are and what their yearly assessment, if it goes up higher than is anticipated in the brownfield plan TIF schedule, which I think you were, 1.5%? Yeah, 1%. Throughout the state this year, or last year, I should say, in 23, 24, we saw 2.42% increase average across the state. So they have a really conservative estimate, so the good thing is we might actually get it paid down quicker.
And as far as the assessment of the property goes, our assessing team here, and Joe, you might pop in on this too, but our assessing team still creates an assessment of the property and the improvements that are going forward. And as I'm looking at these tables that were supplied to the board on the packet and that were printed on the desk, the emergency services special assessment is paid on the increased tax, on the increased assessment value.
Yes.
Okay. All right. With that, does Claire or Brian or Joe or Ann have anything else to add before we turn over for some questions?
Great job, Ann. We've got some of these units already in the state, and I'll just give one quick story so you can actually know the families that move into this. In White Cloud, we put up 8 units. And then a husband and wife called our office. They have 3 kids. They made $102,000 a year. The dad was a mechanic and the mom was a preschool teacher. They were living in the in-laws' basement for 3 years with the triple bunk beds because they couldn't find any housing in White Cloud. We were the first new homes to go in there, and they made $103,000 a year. When they originally called our leasing office, they made too much, and so they originally got declined. Our leasing agent was on her game, and I sent out the new MSHDA increase for the year. It was $104,000. The leasing agent called the family back and said, "You qualify," and the mom burst into tears immediately. So when we're looking at workforce housing, that's what we're facing across the state, that families making 6 figures can't find housing. So I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, questions from the board?
So the market rate rent, or no, sorry, the workforce housing rent is going to be assessed for 16 years, right? Or guaranteed?
Yes.
At least through 16? I just don't want a Trail 45 to happen again.
No, it will be an actual agreement filed with MSHDA that basically is a.
Sorry, can you come up? They can't hear on the recording. Sorry.
So there's actual paperwork that's filed with the state that basically says these are income restricted homes up to the 20%. In order to get the tax increment financing reimbursement for those 20% units, they have to fulfill the rent requirements. So if, say, they decided, oh, I want to go full market rate, they wouldn't get any reimbursement for the TIF. But
And
what
this-
you're saying is you're hoping that there will be a deed
Like, is it
income.
20 years that?
It's
It's 16,
How
I
long do we
think,
have
right?
it in yours?
Sorry.
So this
I
is
know
the-
I read it, I just can't
Yeah, I think
remember
it's
what it was.
14 years of income restriction.
So one thing I do want to just clarify, 1245 has been mentioned before. That was under a completely different scenario, different program.
The pilot, or like LIHTC?
And so this is very different from that. And
Just don't want to get us in that same situation.
sure, well, you can only obligate them for so long too,
Right,
remember?
I want to know how long.
Yep,
So it
so,
goes basically with the reimbursement period of the tax revenue.
Yeah, the Brownfield plan anticipates 14 years of affordability, and, correct, and if they were to, I guess, we haven't gotten to the reimbursement agreement discussion yet, if there was a move to no longer income restrict, then we would no longer receive the tax increment revenues.
Right.
And that's straightforward in the development, that's in the development and reimbursement agreement, it's required by MSHDA, we have to report, all of that. type of
Right,
thing, so.
okay, thank you.
other questions?
Go ahead, Glenn. Go ahead. Okay, all right, bear with me here. It's been like drinking out of a fire hose. I can appreciate the experts in the room that understand the ins and outs of this. We went kind of 0 to 100 real quick. On the page for the project financials that talks about income assumptions, just so I understand, the delineation between the number of units that are defined as workforce housing versus kind of the market rate is based on that 20%? Okay, or whatever the closest number is to that.
It's a rounding.
I guess the discount for the workforce housing, what is the math that went into that to get to that number?
That's 100% of area median income rents as determined by MSHDA. So MSHDA produces a chart every May that says for 60% AMI, for a 1-bedroom unit, rent is this, and 2 and 3. And so there's a table that lays that out. So those are 100% AMI rents for a 3-bedroom unit, 100% AMI rents for a 4-bedroom unit, 100% AMI rents.
Okay, so.
5-bedroom unit.
So for example, the 3-bedroom, that 2316, that's a defined absolute number that comes from a document from the state of Michigan
That is the.
that will be updated Annually?
Right, so, yeah,
Okay,
those rental rates will increase as inflation increases,
okay.
but still subject to that ceiling that MISHDA's established.
And through this agreement, you're bound to whatever that MISHDA
The rent table. Yeah, we
rent
haven't seen
table
the
is,
agreement
okay.
yet, But I think so, yes.
I was
Okay,
just going to say, Anna's over there nodding as he's answering, so.
okay, all right. And then the other ones that are market rate, those can fluctuate wherever the market drives those? Okay. What is the, I think I saw an assumption in here, and I didn't write down where I saw it. There was a document that showed what the project cost would be, the total project cost, is that right?
We have total eligible activities
Okay.
cost that's being reimbursed through the tax increment revenues.
Okay, so
It's
it's,
about 10 million and change. Total construction costs, including the homes, 40, 50, I'm hearing 50 million.
50 million, okay, all right, that makes a little more sense, I just wanted the clarification.
Yeah.
So I think that answers a number of them. Can y'all or somebody, maybe it's you, Ann, just kind of go through and explain to me, I think I understand it by what it says, what tax capture is in this scenario?
Sure. Are you asking me what taxes we capture?
No, not what taxes, but just explain generally speaking what that means. It's taxes that are collected, it sounds like, under normal circumstances, but under this agreement, they're refunded to help supplement the cost of the project, right?
Correct. So you pay, everybody who owns a home or rents, you have the taxes kind of built into your rent a lot of times. So essentially, you pay the taxes get paid, the taxes that are associated with only this property, only this eligible property. It's not like a district, a DDA or a TIFA or other. It's just a single eligible property. Whatever property taxes are paid on those goes to the authority, and then the authority, Brownfield Authority, reimburses for eligible costs that are incurred by the developer.
Okay, yeah.
Makes
All right,
sense.
yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
And it's the amount that's on the increased value of the property.
Yeah, so basically, the current taxes that are being paid on the property will be paid in perpetuity until the Brownfield plan is completed. So the tax revenues that are currently being paid will always be paid. And then it's only the incremental increase in the property taxes based on the new development that are capturable under the Brownfield.
Okay,
So we're not going to lose any tax money.
right, okay. Okay, that's good. That helps me clarify that. I guess for the development team, a couple of questions real quick.
Go ahead, Brian and Joe, come on up, feel free.
Do you have, in y'all's vast knowledge of all these developments y'all put in around the country, do you have any estimated number of school-age kids that are going to be in this development?
We do not. We estimate about, I think the census is, houses these size bring about 2.5 kids to an area, so we're looking at 3 to 5 bedrooms.
Okay,
So you're going to find families are more susceptible to these units, but I guess I could pull some numbers from our rental inventories right now, but the TIF law is new.
yeah,
So I would imagine that you would have larger families moving in because the salary requirements go up with more kids.
okay,
So the MISHDA numbers that also publish the rent and bound us to the rent also bound us to the annual family income, and there's a graduated system for larger families.
okay, all right. So I guess the next question I've got, kind of back to the board, or maybe you know a little bit about this, Beth. As part of this capture, there's some school taxes. Is there a scenario where okay. I guess I'm wondering if there's a scenario where there's going to be school taxes sort of pulled back to pay for the project, where there's in fact an increase in students in the local schools, so they'll have a higher burden on the local school district.
Yeah, so the local school district is held harmless
Okay.
under Act 321. So schools are funded through the state school aid fund on a per pupil basis.
Sure.
So there's count day. If you have kids,
Yep.
it's really important that you show up on count day, because that drives how much money you get from the state. So more people living in the district means more revenue coming in. Ultimately, what's being captured is the dollars flowing into the state school aid fund, which is a $20 billion fund, so very, very small drop in a very, very large bucket. And so ultimately, the legislature only has so much money to work with statewide, and they're appropriating it on a per pupil basis around. So because of that mechanism, TCAPs will not receive less money because this revenue is being captured. There's less money in the school aid fund.
Yeah, I guess I get that, because it's coming out of the state, so it's a big pot of money that's mixed all across the state, different funding mechanisms. There's just less of it coming in from this one particular project.
Correct, but then here at the
specific.
local level, TCAPs will maybe have 100 more kids because
Sure.
of this, which means more funding for them if that were to occur.
And
Okay.
it's a specific amount of time,
Right.
after the 20, 21 years, then the taxes go up.
Right. Okay. And I probably have a couple more maybe here in a minute, but I'll let some other people speak. Last one here. You've made some assumptions here on rents based off the MISTA charts and some market rate assumptions. What happens with other costs associated with living in this development? Utilities is kind of a big one that comes to mind.
So the residents would be responsible for the utility payment, and in our factor, I don't think we're required to by law, but in just being good business people, we subtracted that out. So we did an audit of our homes. You saw the pictures of them. We did an energy audit to say, with trash, with gas, with electric, everything like that.
Yeah.
What's that going to come out to? We came out at about $400 a home for monthly utilities. We back that out. So there's the rent ceiling. We're under that to make up for more than enough for utility gap.
I guess I'm not following that. So the rent ceiling, so you're saying that the market for a 3-bedroom market rate?
So you're talking market rate.
Well, no,
Workforce housing.
So if you look up, so if you're on slide 12, and if you look at the 3-bedroom workforce housing
yeah,
thing, the rent that we're showing is $2,316.
Sure.
That is substantially lower by a couple $100 than the MISTA cap.
oh, okay,
So we're below that to allow our residents, because when you calculate your housing cost, it's not just your rent, it's also your utility expense. So we want to make sure that our tenants are financially healthy. So they're not house poor, so to speak. We're not charging rent at the absolute limit.
Yeah.
We're below it.
so you set this artificially low by a couple of $100 below the
Yes.
MISTA assumption, but you're not bound, the number you're presenting here in front of us, you're not bound to that number, you're bound to another number which is in the MISTA chart, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but I mean, this is going to be across our whole project.
Yeah, but I'm saying you're not bound to this number. For the workforce housing numbers you presented here, you just said that you lowered them by a couple $100 to accommodate, more affordability, but you're not bound to that number. You
I
presented a
think
number that you're not.
We'd put that in our reimbursement agreement. I think that would be covered in our reimbursement.
And go ahead and hop up here.
Yeah, so, this is good, I've been sitting all day in the car, so. What they will be bound to, so I understand what you're saying. You're saying they're representing currently that they're only getting, say, they're only asking $2,300 a month for a house, right? What they are legally, well, not legally, but what we will have identified in the development and reimbursement agreement is that anything 100% or lower, area medium income, published rents by MISTA is what they have to meet. So could it be higher than the 23? Yes, it could. And does it go up by year? Yes, it does, because MISTA increases the percentage each year on rents and income.
But that also affects their reimbursement too. If that changes, it affects their reimbursement as well.
Yes. Let me,
Only if they go over the.
I mean, if they're
Oh,
showing a
It actually would
loss.
reduce their reimbursement.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it proportionally reduces. So if they increase their rent, the control rent that we put in is what is essentially the market rate rent. Anything below 100% or lower they'd be losing dollars on. So if they increase say they had
They make-
80% in there, but they increase it to 100, then they're losing that proportionality that they wouldn't get back.
They make their gap smaller.
They make the gap smaller.
Okay. And I get it. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong. I just wanted an explanation. I know a lot of these are assumptions. I'll let some others talk here.
Sure. Well, wait, if you have another question comes to mind. Glenn, did you had a question?
Yes, you had mentioned, somebody mentioned that it's going to be for 14 years, but I thought I'd read someplace in all the paperwork at home, it could go up to 30 years, and then is that including, there's another 5 years, maybe it's 26 years, there's a 5-year more can go up on the brownfield. I guess I'm confused on all that.
I think you're referring to some language in the brownfield plan that talks about the duration of capture that's permissible. So Public Act 381, the Brownfield Redevelopment Financing Act, allows you to capture tax increment revenues for up to 30 years. So you can go beyond 30 years once you start capturing. You can delay the start of capture for up to 5 years, which would theoretically allow the capture to run out 35 years from today. But you're only capturing a 30-year window. However, the plan sets a ceiling on how much eligible activities you can reimburse. So the faucet, think of, the dollars flowing through a faucet. The faucet shuts off at the lesser of once the developer's been fully reimbursed, or 30 years, which we're currently projecting at, I think, 17 in the plan. Did I answer your question, hopefully?
Yeah.
So their actual costs will dictate what they can get back. Plus, the brownfield agreement will also dictate the number of years that this is going through.
And it's also important to point out, is inflation came up earlier, the tables are assuming inflation runs at 1% annually. If inflation runs at 2%, we're now going to have a larger increment to capture every year because taxable values are increasing more quickly than we're projecting, which will mean we're paying off think of it as a debt. It's not actually a debt, but think of it as you're paying off the debt more quickly because there's more money there each year if inflation's higher. So theoretically, I didn't run the table on what 2% inflation would look like, but it would probably cut 2 or 3 years off of the reimbursement window. Is that fair? Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay.
Yeah, I guess one last one, well, two here, just real quick. So what is the total, point me to the right table, somebody, the total tax capture for this project? Is it the 10 million?
Table 2.
Okay.
Total tax capture, that table
11.
is total reimbursement to the developer and the township. So there's $400,000 being reimbursed to the township for a potential future trail in that number.
Okay.
If you're asking what's the total capture, that would be on.
I think she gave it to me. It's 10.969, is that right?
No, that would be the total developer eligible activity reimbursement, which is a different number than I think. You're asking what's the total dollar amount captured by the Brownfield Authority? Because
How much are y'all getting reimbursed?
that's the 10 point.
Okay.
Minus the 400,000, so it's 10.5.
Okay. So I was sitting here messing with my calculator just because there's a lot of stuff here and trying to understand, where ultimately fully supportive of workforce housing. We need it. I think the idea, the concept is great. But, the truth is in the numbers. I mean, this is spreadsheets y'all put together. Running some numbers based on all of these assumptions, it looks like this development creates approximately 6.6 million in revenue a year in rents, with, of that, with a discount that you factor in here for the workforce housing is about 284,000 annually, which comes out to about a 4% overall blended discount on rents. It's not a huge amount. It's obviously higher for different categories for each individual unit. And that's why I was kind of asking why the disparity in numbers. It's about a 33% discount for a 3-bedroom, 21% for a 4-bedroom and 18% for a 5-bedroom. So it's not really kind of clear across the board. But I guess where I'm going with this is, if I just take into account, okay, we're going through all this effort, we're making these decisions, all these authorities are involved to promote workforce housing and to give, some people some more affordability on their houses, at $284,000 a year as part of this development, that would be generated discounts or savings for more affordability, works out under a 14-year plan to $3.97 million and 20 years to $5.6 million, but yet there's $10.9 million in activities, eligible activities. So is there, I know I probably threw a lot at you and there's a lot of back of the napkin math, but like why such a disparity? Where's the gray area between the numbers I calculated based on the savings for the tenants versus what the eligible activities are?
Can I ask a quick clarification?
Yeah.
You were talking about the different rates on the 3, 4, and 5
Yeah.
bedroom. The percentages that you had there, you showed a smaller percentage difference between the 5 bedroom,
Yeah.
correct? So what I'm thinking, and Brian can tell me if I'm correct, is the difference that you're going to see is based on the market rate, because it's the control rent to the market rent. And the market rent is going to depend on the demand for those types of homes. They may see in the market a much larger demand for a 3-bedroom home, per se, than they do a 5-bedroom home. There may be a lot of families with, 2 children, 2.5 kids and a dog who are like, we can't even fill 5 bedrooms, so why do we want to rent a 5-bedroom? So that's my assumption with the decreasing difference, just because that's the market.
Yeah, I think if I understand the question correctly, that is correct, Beth, that the gap is, one, it's based on market rent, and two, it's the control rent is set by MISTA. So that's where we get the delta from. I think I'm understanding this correctly.
Actually, may I? So I know what you're asking. You were only looking at the rents. You were looking at the disparity, and you were absolutely correct, like 3.9, 4 point, right?
Yeah.
That's based on potential rent loss, using that control rent of that market rate
Sure.
that we used. It's the infrastructure cost and the site preparation activities that you were not accounting for that are also eligible under this brownfield plan. So in addition to potential rent loss, in order to provide workforce housing, they have to put in infrastructure and
Yep.
preparation to put those homes in. So there's a proportional cost included in this brownfield plan for those hard costs that are getting reimbursed.
3 baskets of goods that they can get reimbursed for.
Yeah. And if it was a rehab, the entire amount of qualified rehab on any projects coming in. Pretty crazy. Yeah.
Does that make sense, Matt?
Yeah, it does. And I guess my last question to you, Beth, considering all of the spreadsheets, the numbers, the forecast, the financials involved here.
That have made some interesting Zoom meetings.
It's a lot of stuff. Has the township, are we being responsible to the township without having a third party, an accounting firm of ours that works for the township, review any of these numbers?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I talked with Ann about that very early on, about, I believe it's Baker Tilly, actually. In other states, they do a review of brownfield-type projects for municipalities. They don't do that in the state of Michigan, and I looked for something like that, and there, it wasn't available to my knowledge. Now, we are very lucky because we have Ann, who works for the Brownfield Authority and with the county, and is available as a resource for us in working with developers. So I felt very good in partnering with Ann in doing that, and her looking at the development and what she has seen elsewhere. As well, I know where the developer has come from. This is not the original proposal that they brought to us. I don't think you would mind me saying that the original proposal was 10% workforce housing with 100% of the infrastructure cost is reimbursable. And that seemed skewed for quite a bit for what we were getting. So we worked with them and said, honestly and very sincerely, we didn't feel like it would pass through this board, the Brownfield Board, or the County Board of Commissioners. And they listened, they looked at their markets that they are already existing in, and with their financial consultant, went back and looked at things and brought it up to 20% and down to 50% for the infrastructure that would be reimbursable, up to 50% of those infrastructure costs. Now, there are some projects, and Ann mentioned these, that are tied together, the percentages, right? So they're saying, we're putting out 100% of workforce housing and we want 100% of the infrastructure costs back, or 20%, 50%, and we want 20 and 50% back, right? But those are multifamily apartment buildings, which is a very different infrastructure than laying out 170 homes on acres with water and sewer connecting to all of them, other utilities connecting to all of them, sidewalks and so forth. So when we started to look at it, Ann and I talked a lot about this, and Claire as well, when they, have moved up to 20% and brought that ask down to 50% due to the difference in infrastructure costs for the type of development, it seemed much more rational and in line for that. Again, these numbers that you have are estimates. And I do think the important thing to realize is that they only are reimbursed the actual costs. The other thing is, from a township's perspective, what are we losing out as a township? So we're losing out, quite frankly, on, get the L4029 out that's later in your packet. What are you, 0.6871, I think? We're losing out on 0.6871, which is, as you know, a very small amount. What we are essentially doing, if I can just, call a spade, we are having our community and the community's taxing authorities helping us to partner in providing an opportunity for housing that has workforce housing, an opportunity for amenities with the trail that we mentioned, as well as housing that I think will be valuable to people. We hear a lot in East Bay that people do really enjoy the single-family home type of development, right? Bayview is nice. Bayview's great. Joe's done a nice job with that development, but we have many people that I think are going to be interested in the single-family homes. It seems to be what most people, we think, that are attracted to East Bay are interested in. So you rarely have that type of, I haven't heard about it from anybody so far using this newer legislation and implementation to doing the single-family homes. So I thought that that's really also intriguing too. It gives us, a lot of what we have seen in East Bay, like a Cherry Ridge and those types of developments, different obviously than Alta Vista, but Alta Vista along the same lines. And again, too, neighborhoods where families, like Brian mentioned, will feel at home and comfortable. It has a sidewalk. The kids can walk on the sidewalk. It's got lighting, it's got a dog park, those types of, did you guys have pickleball too? Because people are gonna love that, because people are pickleball crazy. But you know what I'm saying. So, I felt very comfortable bringing this to you after the months that we spent talking with the developer and getting this to something where I feel like it's worthwhile to do, and it gets that quantity. Honestly, the workforce housing is great, but just having quantity of housing is also important. I'm sorry, Brian, you stepped up. Did you want to say something?
One thing I wanted to add, you bring up a good point about these are the numbers, trust us. Before we get a dime of the money back, everything's going to be audited through receipts and invoices, and this basically sets the limit of what we can capture. So if our costs exceed this, we can't come back and say, oops, sorry, infrastructure was actually this much, we need $1 million more. That's illegal and impossible under the plan. And if we can only show costs for, let's say, $3 million of infrastructure improvements, we only get that. So everything is audited on the back end in terms of our cost structure and everything like that. But you bring up very good points.
Yeah, and I think I've got to bring this up because I'd be remiss if I didn't. So Roger is here as well from Oglomabi, right? That's right. Like, got Roger here. And so I do want you guys to know the property is a facility. So it was an old orchard, and part of the infrastructure and site preparation that they're doing on the property is really to manage some of the areas, limited as they are, to reduce exposure to some of the direct contact, because these are single-family homes. And is that a fair statement? That you're going to be managing on-site, you know, a lot of the infrastructure, site prep's going to assist with that management of those soils, because you'll be able to put them under like certain areas and berm them and.
It's under the RV parking.
Yeah. Oh, so you've gone through this, good.
3 times.
Okay, good. Okay.
And you remember.
Yeah, okay, perfect, but you know, I have to bring that up because that's important, and that did increase the cost of infrastructure and site prep because they are dealing with this, but I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that I have brought this up multiple times with Eagle and with Mishta, and they're going to be working with the development team and their consulting firm on a self-implementation plan, which is similar to, you know, basically, it's a do-care plan that will be submitted to the Brownfield Authority for review.
So if everybody looks at the packet and looks at this figure, the blue area, is that for which is deed restricted?
A lot of the remediation has been started already by previous developers.
Yeah.
And by those that took care in it years before, which Joe would have a good idea on that too, with family history. But, I mean, all I can say is I think it's a great project. I think it's needed. I get the comments and the concerns, but I think it's a great project. I would support it.
Question, Glenn?
Yeah.
You might as well just stay there or sit.
Again, sitting in the car all day, not a bad thing.
Okay, how many of these have we got in Grand Traverse County and at what townships?
Yeah, that's a great question. So
All of mine are.
he called me on the way up. So we have one approved in Garfield Township. We have maybe 2 or 3 coming in Garfield. We have, obviously, East Bay Township. The city of Traverse City just passed their first housing, Mishta Housing Project on Monday night, last week. Longest meeting ever. But they passed it. Acme Township is bringing in one. We've heard rumblings in Fife Lake. We've heard rumblings in Long Lake. So everybody's getting on.
There was one at Planning Commission last week that said that they were coming with it too.
Oh, another one in East Bay.
We've been talking with a developer as well that has some challenges with some infrastructure where they are having issues with other agencies that are strongly requesting that they install certain infrastructure, which they don't feel they need to. And so we've been talking with them too, because this might be a way that we can have the infrastructure that's for the benefit of the community without just one developer paying for that.
Okay, where I was going with that question
Yes, sir.
is, when I look at this and see Commission on Aging, Coney Senior Center, Conservation District, Road Commission, Veterans, Beta Library, and then NMC and stuff. You take Garfield, you take East Bay, even a couple, Acme, whatever, pretty soon, those people aren't gonna get much money, and they're gonna go back to the taxpayers for an increase in their millage, because we've taken it away, Garfield's taken away. That's a big concern.
That's another good question. Let me correct it. So nobody is taking anybody's tax dollars away. That's not what this is. We are just adding to the tax base. So every new project that comes in actually adds to a new tax base to the existing tax base. So all of the various taxing jurisdictions that are being serviced currently, none of those dollars are being taken away. In fact, even on this property, none of those property taxes are being taken away. It's only based on when they build the property that for a period of time those are removed or not paid. However, you have to realize that the property and the project probably wouldn't go forward without these types of brownfield incentives. And so that's why we take a risk for 10 years to get a huge gain 10 years later.
The other thing, too, that I think of when I look through here, and I think of young families who need the housing, I think of when I raised my family here. Do you know how many times we used the resources of the Commission on Aging, the County Senior Center, the Conservation District, Veterans Affairs, or Animal Control? We didn't use them at all.
Well, that's assuming that nobody's moving in with their mom or grandparents or somebody else that might live with the family.
Of course, I'm just saying in general, like a family that you would
Yeah.
see here looking for that, there's not an inordinate amount of resources being taxed upon them as well. They're not going backwards in their revenues that are limited for the number of years of the brownfield, but it does pop up as well.
Yeah, I think to Glenn's point, though, you create a scenario where you could be opening the door to put more strain on those services without any additional revenue coming in, potentially.
But think too about, what Ann said, which is, would these developments happen without these incentives? And we're hearing from developers no, and we are seeing by their audited financials that that's the case. So, I mean, and everybody is screaming for housing. So, something's got to give somewhere.
Sure.
Well, this particular property had 2 failed attempts, at minimum.
Yeah. No, I get that. I mean, it's definitely a unique scenario. I'm fully supportive, like I said, of the idea of workforce housing. What I have a hard time supporting, and this doesn't go for this is for anything in general in my personal life or sitting on this board, is something that I don't fully understand because it's so complicated and there's so many variables and there's so many assumptions that are made. It's tough to kind of wrap your head around, and you don't want to sort of make a decision uninformed on something that is based on a pretty significant amount of money and a pretty significant amount of time.
I do understand that. I do, Matt, and I appreciate your questions, honestly. One thing I would make the analogy to, we have utilized the resources of the brownfield and the county, and I'm thankful for those resources. And the developer can tell you how intrinsically they've been involved. As a matter of fact, I think they've had more contact with Ann than I have. I'm like, yep, let me know when the meetings are and go over the stuff, but she's the needle-nosed, detailed person. And Having said that, I have definitely looked at this and comfortable with it. But as far as, I understand what you're saying. This is a new concept. We've talked about how new the statute is and how it hasn't been used a tremendous amount, a limited number of times up here. But I go back to that feeling of, when I had family that needed heart surgery. I don't understand that either. I can tell you I don't, but I trust in the experts. And I'm not saying you blindly trust. I'm saying we document. There's a process of this going forward. This kicks this off. This is not the be-all, end-all end. There are attorneys that work for the Brownfield Authority who review this and review the documents. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to think, is Scott Howard your attorney? Scott Howard. So I do think that there is a good amount of oversight with this as well.
I guess one other thing kind of came to mind when we're thinking through this. You made a comment, Ann, that that for those situations where this developer is not in compliance with the MISTA rent numbers on an annual basis, they won't be reimbursed incrementally for that amount, right?
That's accurate.
So could there be a scenario that we go through this whole exercise and everything's approved and we move forward, pat each other on the back that this is a, workforce housing development, and the market creates a situation where maybe it's more advantageous to just do away with it? I mean, could they arbitrarily walk away from the agreement? They would be giving up the dollars associated with it, but could those, could they kind of claw that back and say, nah, we've got a better market to maybe only rent out 10% in workforce housing? Or are they bound?
There is a document that they have to sign that we have to file with MISTA. It's almost like a deed restriction on the property that basically says they have to hold the 20% for the period in which they are receiving the obligation of the TIF reimbursement. So the only thing we can hold them to is they don't get their money if they don't hold up their end of the deal. So
they could. They could. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They totally could, yeah.
Okay.
But we know what we know today, and they're not going to get the infrastructure and the site prep if they don't, fulfill both the potential rent loss and the infrastructure and site prep. So it's a package deal.
Yeah. Okay.
But no, that's a fair question.
No, like I said, I do appreciate your questions. I've had a number of months to get used to this concept, to talk about it with Ann,
Yeah.
to talk about it with the developer, so I appreciate the questions very much.
I think on the
Sure, Mindy? Go ahead. What was that? Go ahead, Mindy.
So although this is a new part of Act 381, I've been dealing with Act 381 since it came out. So I've written many of these tables. I've written many of these work plans. I know the questions you're asking and the other questions that it could be. To answer your question you just had about they still could go back and get a brownfield plan for some of these activities, not the infrastructure because it's not a core community, but like that $60,000 for the environmental activities. They could still get a brownfield plan. Probably wouldn't be worth it, but they could do it. But you got to look at the but-for analysis. Would this development happen if not for the brownfield plan, right? We have a huge deficit in housing, not just workforce housing, but just housing. I mean, we've had presentation after presentation of, change the zoning ordinance so that we can get more units per acre and, all these other things that we've tried to do to make it so that we can have more housing. And so I feel like that is a focus of the township, so it makes a whole lot of sense to use whatever mechanisms that we can to get housing in our community for the constituents. I agree that this $10 million seems like a whole lot of money, and I agree that it feels like we're losing taxes, but we're not going to ever get these taxes if we don't do the development and if we don't allow for a brownfield plan. And I will say that most brownfield plans don't actually come in at the amount that they are, because there is that you can't get any more. You can't get $1 more than what this brownfield Act 381 work plan says, so you better have a really, really good number, and then sometimes they put a contingency on top of it so that they can come in and get that number. So I am in full support of this. The only comments or questions we had is, did you do the BEA? Just want to make sure that you did the BEA, baseline environmental assessment, to make sure that when the property transfers that you're not considered a liable party, and that kind of thing. And if you have any questions that they're not answering and you feel I might, Roger and I have been doing these for almost 30 years, and I've been working with Ann for at least 5, so.
And when you were talking about, too, kind of the focus of the zoning ordinance master plan, also, I think we had Ann before us talking about housing. Gosh, that was a number of months ago, but kind of talking about these types of incentives and programs, as well as Yarrow talking about the shortage too.
Yeah, we've been using Housing North Study. So the Grand Traverse County Brownfield Authority, when we look at incoming projects, we rely on Housing North Study as a sort of that litmus test on, where are the right types of portfolios and what needs to be, looked at in terms of market rate rents versus workforce.
And last week, we did have a sketch plan review at Planning Commission. It's on the property just north of the industrial park, off 3 Mile
Section
Road.
19.
No, but it's all
Klaus's
proposed to be,
development.
Klaus's development, it's all proposed to be workforce housing. Was it 10 buildings?
Oh my God, I haven't heard of that.
It was 12 buildings, 200, it's an incredible amount of housing that is potentially coming just right up here on 3 Mile Road. And they're talking about trying to use this but that's just adding to our housing and with the crisis that we've been.
Making East Bay that much more attractive to those young families and workforce housing needs.
Well, are there any other questions? With that, is there a motion? This would be Resolution 2024-20. And again, what this resolution ultimately does is concurs and determines that the Brownfield Plan constitutes a public purpose as described in the Brownfield Plan. And again, this goes on a process after that to the Brownfield and the county and to MISTA.
I'll make that motion if I can find
I
it.
support it if Minnie makes it.
Okay, there is, Walters has moved, and Escortade supports the approval of Resolution 24-20, a resolution of concurrence regarding Live AE East Bay Brownfield Plan. Further discussion or questions? Okay, Ian, go ahead, yes.
Yeah, I've just, would really like some other eyes on behalf of the township to look at it, a professional that, and I know Mindy, you said you've looked at this and put a lot of this stuff together. I trust what you said, but, any of these activities that we go through, financial related, moving budgets around by hundreds of dollars, we have a third party look at it, and it seems like it would be in our best interest to do that in this case.
So, I mean, we will, as I mentioned to you, this will go through the Brownfield and goes through their reporting and auditing requirements as well as through their legal counsel too. So we will definitely take every advantage of those opportunities through that process. Okay. Other comments or questions? Ann, we'll do a roll call vote.
Walters.
Yes.
Escortade. Bartlett.
Yes.
Cook.
No.
Lyle.
Yes.
M. Cortade.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to the developers, thank you very much to Ann and to Claire, and thank you to the board for your discussion and analysis. With that, we will move on to the public hearing for the fiscal year 2025 emergency services budget. This is for all three, the Fire Fund 207, and the Ambulance Fund 210, and Police 206. I think I have those numbers right. And so at this time, it is 8:31, and we'll open the public hearing for those three emergency services regarding the budget and the mills associated with them, which are, let me get my hands on it. 1.2 mils for the ambulance, 2.75 for Metro, and 0.26 mils for the community police officer millage. So are there any comments for public hearing? Okay, seeing no comments, we will close the public hearing at 8:31. And we will bring this back to the board. Hold on one second. Move to approve levying the following millages for the 2024 tax rate request form: 0.26 mils for the police fund, 2.75 for fire, and 1.2 for ambulance fund. Is there a motion?
I'll make the
a motion? Is there support?
Support.
Okay, motion is made by Walter, support by Cook. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by no? All right, very good. We'll move on to the L4029. So this is actually a little redundant from the earlier motion, but we will do this. This is the 4029 that is filed every year with the county. You can see ours is a little bit different, and the supporting data is on the second page. It's always been reported as though it was like a township, general law township allocated millage, and that's based on an old AG opinion from many, many years ago. And I have taken a deep dive into this with not only our legal counsel, who is working on it for another county, for county equalization, but also with MTA, and this is the appropriate way, and I've run this through Jim Baker as well, for us to show. You can see that as a charter township, by resolution, we are able to levy 5 mills, but that's only 5 mills at the time that we became a charter township, and then the Headley rollback takes effect. So that's where the table that's attached shows, and I've also included the general law one where we have used those same numbers. So those are in place. Last year, we would have been at 4.2754 with an allowable 4.2176. We were not factored at all through equalization in column 1. Allows the maximum allowable millage levy at 4.2176. However, what I have included with the millage requested to be levied is the 0.6778, which is actually identical if we would have filled it out for a general law charter township. Does anyone have any questions on this? Okay, is there a motion to approve the L4029 as presented? Is there support? Motion made by Lyle and supported by Bartlett. Any further discussion? All those in favor indicate by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by no? Okay, thank you very much. You have no idea what kind of a rabbit hole that was talking. And the funny thing is just to end up at the same place where you started, which is we're assessing the same, we're levying the same mills. But anyway, we'll move on to 4 Mile Roundabout. I wanted to, there isn't anything supported in here. I just wanted to let you know my discussions and seek some guidance. So as early as, gosh, I think January this year, maybe even the fall last year, I had mentioned to the road commission manager to start trying to find a company that would take care of the weeds at the roundabout. So when that was put in, part of the construction is a 3-year contract with the company that put the vegetation in, which was a nice blissful 3 years because nobody had to think about it. We didn't have to think about it, the road commission didn't have to think about it. Unfortunately, the company who had that contract is no longer doing that or things like that, and so they're not available. As well, the road commission no longer, from discussion, finds it appropriate that they want to have vegetation in any of their roundabouts. And I said, well, that's interesting. What are you going to do with the other 3 roundabouts that you have that all have vegetation in them? If you remember, there was quite a bit of public support, and gosh, there were even there was a conference that took a tour of that roundabout. I don't know if it was an engineering one or what, but they had some good feedback that they even used that same template down in the other couple roundabouts with the stamped concrete and the vegetation and so forth. So they've informed me that when those come out of contract, they're going to fill them all in with stone and remove all of the vegetation. I am not in favor of that. I was originally, when we put that in, I had thought that we would contract with somebody to do the weeding on that and just make sure those plants are good. Of course, as I mentioned, we had the subsequent year, so that was great. But then when they put in the other ones with the vegetation, I was like, well, I'm not going to do it because you're going to have to do it for all of them anyway. Just throw this in the contract together. And that was the discussion that I had with the former manager. But now what I'm hearing from the manager and apparently through their board is that they want nothing to do with it and they're going to turn them into rock unless we do something else. So I would like to just work with some companies. It's a little out of hand this year, and get somebody out there to do that work, because it's a really nice infrastructure feature that we've had positive comments about, and now it looks pretty, huh?
Kind of looks like natural, the fields around it.
It could. I noticed today on the one side, like coming west, it's like kind of coming into the road. I was like, well, they could just get a brush hog out here. Yeah.
I just today, because it's tax season, so I'm seeing lots of people. But today, I had 4 people, and there was a little cluster out there talking about the 4-mile roundabout. And, you know, one woman's like, well, can I get out and do it? And we're like, there's a liability there, and it's, you know, I'm not sure that you need to be out there doing that. But there are, you know, we get a lot of comments on what's going on, and we've referred them to the road commission, but.
Don't worry, the road commission's referring them back to us.
I'm sure they are.
But, and the road commission manager did ask me if I thought that there would be any volunteers who would want to do it. And I said, well, honestly, I said, you've kind of gone past that at this point. There's so much overgrown, it's too much to ask volunteers to do. Had it been cleaned up and you just needed to go do some housekeeping, that would be something different. Like we could get, you know, the vests and have them do the road control or something like that. But at this point, I think we've got to, you know, have somebody do that. So just wanted to, I mean, we have funding to be able to do that. Go ahead, Mindy.
I just want to make sure the road commission's going to allow us to touch it.
They will. Yep. They prefer when people pay their bills for them. So are you guys fine with
Yeah,
that?
go for it.
I will, you know, I don't find it to be a great scenario. I feel like we invested in partnership with them. And if that was the only roundabout with vegetation, I would totally have been like, yep, that's our responsibility, no doubt, because we wanted that. But with the other ones having the vegetation, I'm like, you're going to have to be doing this.
Well,
So,
that's just sad, because if they do what they claim, they're just going to turn them into just rock. And, you know, I look at, it's no different in its city property, I think, on Woodmere, the boulevards down there. I mean, those look so nice. And it takes, I think they're out there maybe 3 times during the season to maintain them, and it's just
yeah, I think
sad.
they've only been out there once last year each time, and so it's been pretty good. Now, it got bad a little bit last year, but they got out there, I think, in late July, mid to late July. So it wasn't as bad. It's gotten pretty bad this year.
So the road commission is saying that they will not spend a few $100s to maintain it, but yet they're saying as opposed to doing that, they're going to spend thousands and thousands on stone and cleaning them out and filling them with rock or concrete?
Once.
Oh.
But it's a one-time investment. You got to look at it from that.
I don't think they'll
mean-
clean them on an annual basis, do
But
you?
even if they put rock in it, it's there. That's the way I would prefer it to go, but I know I'm different than most.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I'd say get it done. I mean, it was a lot of money spent, design,
foolishly.
implementation of a project to get done to begin with. Yeah.
Well, and, you know, it's just like our gardens out here. I mean, we get a ton of comments on how beautiful it is. And we've had the same on the 4 mile, so
Yeah.
we wanted that as a feature, and so that's,
And when it is looking good, we do get comments on
well, we
how
get
nice it
comments when
is.
it's looking bad, too.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the ones we want, but.
I've often thought, and don't jump on me to start with, but they ought to plant some trees in there. And I mean, you look at the city when you go down Front Street, they're not big trees, they're small ones. Something,
No, Claire and I would agree with you, but they don't, the road commission, even the previous manager, they don't want anything like trees in roundabouts or anywhere in the medians
They
or,
got those setting up, I mean, in reality,
I know,
it would really put a nice look to it, you know.
yeah,
That's just my
yeah,
opinion.
yeah.
You're going the other way. Plant trees out there.
It's pretty, I mean, I looked, like when Ma was down in Starkville, their whole boulevard had the center median, and it made a huge difference down there, as opposed to like other cities similar that didn't, just a big difference. Anyway, all right, well, I will look into that, and hopefully I can get somebody this year. If I can't, they'll be doing a heavy-duty job next spring then.
Might be better to just weed whack it this year.
I was just gonna say, get a lawnmower.
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll see what can be done. All right, well, thank you very much for that conversation. I appreciate that. With that, we have a last opportunity for public comment. If you would like to make public comment, we're happy to listen to your perspective. Seeing no public comment, our next meeting date is October 14th at 6:30 PM. And with that, we stand adjourned unless there's any objections.